It was the eve of Thanksgiving across the United States. Families gathered around tables in kitchens where the smell of roasted turkey filled the air with warmth and laughter. Airports were bustling, highways were crowded, as it was the start of one of the busiest travel weekends of the year. However, something very different was happening in the skies over the Pacific Northwest, something that would go on to baffle the FBI. This was no ordinary flight. This was the beginning of one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. The tale of the man who hijacked an aircraft and then vanished into thin air. On November 24, 1971, Northwest Orient Flight 305 was scheduled to depart Portland, Oregon, en route to Seattle, a short 30-minute flight. On board were 36 passengers and 6 crew members. Among them was a modest, quiet man in a black overcoat and business suit. He carried a briefcase and a paper ticket in the name of Dan Cooper. Everything was normal, but shortly after takeoff from Portland, he handed a note to a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner. Thinking it was just a flirty message or a phone number, she pocketed it without reading. DB Cooper then whispered into the flight attendant, "Miss, you'd better read that." Florence read the note, and her heart raced. It was simple, direct, and terrifying. The man claimed he had a bomb in his briefcase and demanded her attention. With trembling hands, she followed him back to his seat. There he calmly opened the case. Inside the case was a mass of wires, red cylinders, and a battery pack. Whether it was real or not, it looked convincing. The man then laid out his demands with cold clarity: $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, 2 main, 2 reserve, a fuel truck waiting in Seattle, no tricks, no tracking devices. He wasn't shouting or threatening other passengers. Instead, he spoke like someone who had planned this meticulously. The flight crew quickly relayed his demands to air traffic control, who in turn contacted the FBI. Inside the cabin, passengers were unaware of the drama playing out behind the cockpit door. They were told there was a mechanical delay. Nobody knew they were part of a hijacking. Outside, police were making attempts to satisfy Cooper's demands. For the next 3 hours, the plane circled Seattle, burning time while the demands were gathered. Bundles of marked $20 bills totaling $200,000 were secured from local banks. Military parachutes were requested from a nearby base, and a fuel truck was dispatched to Seattle-Tacoma Airport. Meanwhile, Dan Cooper maintained his composure. He struck up a conversation with the flight attendants. He even offered to cover the cost of his beverage. For someone who was hijacking a commercial jet, he appeared strangely cordial, and that's one of the things that set him apart. He didn't fit the stereotype of a hijacker. No anger, no panic, just calm, calculated control. At 5:39 p.m., the Boeing 727 landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport. Cooper disembarked all 36 passengers, along with 2 flight attendants, in exchange for the money and parachutes. Then came the next set of instructions. He wanted the plane refueled. He gave the pilot a new flight plan: head southeast toward Mexico City and to stay low, around 10,000 feet. Additionally, he also wanted the landing gear to stay down, and the rear staircase was to remain unlocked. Cooper clearly knew about the Boeing 727 inside and out. It was one of the only commercial jets with a rear air stair that could be lowered mid-flight. At 7:40 p.m., the plane took off heading south through turbulent skies above Washington. On board were 4 crew members, 1 hijacker, and a mystery that was about to take flight. About 30 minutes into the flight, over the thick forests of southwestern Washington, something happened. A red light flickered in the cockpit, indicating the rear staircase had deployed. The crew noticed a shift in cabin pressure. The plane jolted slightly as if someone got off. There was no visible proof for them, no radar and no radio broadcast. By the time they landed in Reno, Nevada, Cooper and the money were gone. He had jumped, parachuting out of the aircraft in the middle of a rainstorm, in near total darkness, with only the ransom money, a parachute, and sheer nerve. What followed was the most extensive manhunt in American aviation history. FBI agents descended on the suspected drop zone, a vast stretch of dense forest near Ariel, Washington. However, the terrain was harsh, evidence had been washed away, and the trails muddied by rain. Not a single trace of Cooper was found. The FBI interviewed more than 800 people in the months that followed. They followed up on every rumor, lead, and tip. Based on the evidence of flight attendants, they released a composite sketch. Dan Cooper, or as the media mistakenly began calling him, D.B. Cooper, had vanished without a trace. Over the years, dozens of suspects surfaced, all of whom attracted the attention of investigators and amateur detectives. Richard McCoy, a former Green Beret, who pulled off a similar hijacking just months later. He escaped from prison and was later killed in a shootout with the FBI. But his appearance didn't match the original description. Next was Kenneth Christiansen, a former Northwest Orient Flight attendant with access, expertise, and a peculiar financial background. Although he allegedly confessed on his deathbed, there was no tangible proof that connected him to the hijacking. Then Robert Rackstraw, a skilled forger, pilot, and Vietnam veteran with a track record of dishonesty. In interviews, he even alluded to being Cooper, although he later denied any involvement. Despite promising leads, no suspect has ever been definitively proven to be D.B. Cooper. Then, in 1980, nearly a decade after the hijacking, a boy named Brian Ingram made a discovery. While camping with his family on the Columbia River, not far from the suspected drop zone, he found a bundle of decaying cash buried in the sand. It totaled $5,800, all 20s. The serial numbers matched those given to Cooper. It was the first and only piece of physical evidence ever recovered from the case, but it raised more questions than answers. Why was the money buried? Had it been washed downstream, or was it planted? And more importantly, what happened to the remaining $194,200? As years passed, the FBI's trail grew cold. The case became legendary, appearing in crime anthologies, news specials, and documentaries. Folklore developed around the name D.B. Cooper as a representation of resistance, mystery, and the perfect crime. 45 years later, the FBI formally concluded the case in 2016. They pointed to fading leads, limited resources, and the obvious fact that, despite almost 50 years of searching, they had not come any closer to apprehending the man than they had on that soggy November evening. The public, however, continued to look. D.B. Cooper did more than simply take over an aircraft. He took over a country's imagination. He did the unthinkable. His image appeared on beer labels, posters, and T-shirts, making him a cultural icon. Movies, comic novels, podcasts, and even the Marvel series Loki, in which he is presented as a cunning, time-traveling god, have all told variations of his story. Bars were named after him and conventions are held in his honor. He is the focus of thousands of amateur investigations, Reddit posts, and online detective work. There is more to D.B. Cooper than just crime. As the renegade who defeated the system and fled, he embodies a deeply ingrained aspect of the American mentality. So who was D.B. Cooper? A displeased worker? A renegade veteran? Or a cunning criminal? We may never know, but on November 24th, 1971, a man dressed in a dark suit boarded a plane with a suitcase and a plan. He dived into a storm and vanished, not just from the sky, but from history itself. After all, there's no trace, no confession. There is no closure, just questions. The faint sound of aircraft engines echoed across the treetops. Maybe he's still out there, scanning the skies, still smiling, still free. The truth is still out there, and maybe you'll be the one to crack the case. Share your theories in the comments below. What do you think happened to D.B. Cooper? Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one.